What up, fuckers, and welcome to One Up Pod. Yes.
Oh no. Oh no. Hang on, I need to get my editing notebook. I need the time code to edit that out is 00.00. Okay, great.
I'm going to do it again, so there's no point.
That's staying in.
Right. Sorry, I'll do it again. Just I thought I'd catch you by surprise.
It worked.
It did. What up, fuckers, and welcome to One Up Pod, the monthly gaming podcast where we take a deep dive at a major game of note. I am your host for this month, Andy, and I am joined by Bash.
Hello.
Becky.
Hello.
And Chip.
Hello.
You okay there, Chip?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
It's just how I say hello. It's not weird.
He's just worried about me being the host for this month.
Yeah, very, very worried.
This month, anyway, moving on from Chip's fears, we're going to be discussing Square's groundbreaking, game-changing JRPG masterpiece, Final Fantasy VII. Yes, woo. But before that, let's see how we're all doing, and more importantly, what have we been playing? And I feel like I've already been talking for too long, so Chip, tell us your secrets.
Well, I can't tell you that because the Inland Revenue might actually be listening to this podcast, so I might tell you about the games I've been playing, if that's all right.
You can do that, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Well, I finished Dishonored. I was free playing Dishonored, and I finished it. Got the good ending, thank you very much, before any of you say anything.
You didn't kill any
All right.
children this time, then?
No, I don't think so. I think I saved a child, which I think is different to killing one.
Ever so slightly, yeah.
Semantics,
little
but yeah,
little
yeah, fine.
Yeah, you know, tomato. And I started moving on to the DLC because the first time I played the game, I'd never played the DLC. So I started playing that, and it's really good. It's really, really good. And then I stopped playing that because I bought Disco Elysium, which was on sale on Steam. And my entire life is now that game because I have only put it down to come record with you guys tonight. So big recommendation for Disco Elysium. I think I want us to do a episode on it. Andy suggested it earlier, that we should do that maybe sometime in the future because it's great and I want you all to play it and everyone should play it and I'm going to go play it. Well, not now, but as soon as we're done.
You better not now.
No, I can't.
Yeah, be a bit awkward.
Yeah, a little bit.
If we hear you clicking stuff in the background, we're going to know you're playing it still. So anyway, Becky, what about you? What have you been playing?
So the one I want to talk about is a game called We Were Here from Total Mayhem Games. It's a co-op game, so I played it with my friend the other night. And you play two explorers who were locked in a mysterious castle, and you have to work together to find a way out. But the twist is that one person is in one room, and the other is freely wandering about, so you can't see what the other sees. And it's really fun. The 2 hours flew by, and it's the first in a series of games, so it's quite fun and bite-sized, as well as being quite tense in places and quite creepy as well. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I definitely recommend that if you and a friend are stuck for a gaming evening.
I'm really annoyed that you finished it in 2 hours because it took me and my friend way longer to finish that.
Well, I was playing it with my oldest friend, so I feel there's a level of synchronicity there.
I was playing it with my cousin. That's family.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I was trying to help
we
her.
have blood in our bodies that is the same.
I was trying to help you out. You're
That's a weird way of describing that.
Yeah. Well, it didn't help us either way, and it's free on PS4, right? Or it was free on PS4.
It was. I'm not sure if it is at the moment, but
Okay.
yeah, it's definitely one worth looking out for.
What about you, Bash?
I have been playing, it was literally just the last weekend, demos from Ludo Narracon. So Ludo Narracon is a digital convention that celebrates narrative video games, indie games specifically. So you can imagine it was about as up my street as any kind of gaming convention could get. And it was an initiative.
Yeah, that's basically Sasha Road.
Yeah, basically. It was an initiative of the indie label Fellow Traveller, so they publish quite a lot of really cool games. And I thought what I would do is mention my favourite demos that I played. So I played Minute of Islands. Minute of Islands, it is like beautiful and also grotesque.
Like me.
Yes, like you. The artwork, it's all hand-drawn, and it shows. It's really, really atmospheric, and it's about a girl, Mo, who is on a quest to restart a bunch of, I guess, generators. She's a mechanic in post-apocalypse world. I got really stuck on one of the puzzles, just by the way, but still had a hell of a lot of fun. There was also Beacon Pines. Beacon Pines, not a sex game.
Like me.
Yeah, whatever.
But in all seriousness, it was extremely my shit. It had a really cute aesthetic. All the characters are like these little animals, and the character that you play is his mum has gone missing, and his dad is dead already, and there's like a book, and as you go through the story you pick up what they call charms, but they're just words, and then you can like go back in the book and change the tree of how things happen. So my first playthrough of the demo, I had one thing happen, but it was like, oh, but you did collect a charm since your last, so maybe try change this decision, and it was really cool. I think that's a really cool mechanic, that you can keep changing the story and having different outcomes, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And then just the other one that I absolutely cannot miss mentioning was Kraken Academy with 2 exclamation points. It's holy shit. It's just like it's just everything I want from a game.
I'm so glad you said it's good, because as soon as I saw the title I was like, oh my god, I need it.
Yes, well, you do. It has pixel graphics. It has the sort of the Japanese visual novel stylings going on. There's a character called Broccoli Girl that's literally a piece of broccoli.
Like me?
Cosplay broccoli?
Again, it's another one of those kind of investigative type things. Your character has started at Kraken Academy, and there is a Kraken that you are then helping to, I think, save the school. I'm not entirely sure, but it was really cool. And, there were like another 7 demos that I played that I'm not going to mention, but Ludo Naricon, head onto their website. They've got all of the stuff that they were doing, and they have some really cool games that I'm sure you'll still be able to find out info from their website and find some new indie developers that you might never have seen before.
Cool. As far as me, I've finally become a Switch dickhead, and I've been playing a lot of Animal Crossing, like a year late, but better late than never. And I'm obsessed with Scoot. He's a little green duck that likes to exercise a lot, and he's just the best character ever.
Yeah, but have you got ketchup on your island?
No, fuck ketchup. I've got Sherb.
Sherb is the best.
No, ketchup.
Well, ketchup didn't want to live with me, so ketchup can go to hell.
Well, can you
your
blame
own
them, to be
Switch?
perfectly honest?
Get your own Switch. Get your
I don't
own
want
Animal
one.
Crossing island.
No.
And get ketchup on your own island. Oh, fuck
I
off.
live
Yeah,
vicariously
exactly.
through all of you.
But we don't want to live with
Fuck you.
ketchup.
Sounds great.
I'll just be alone in my corner, like, standing Scoot. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. Very good. Very productive. Normally on these franchise episodes, we do a brief history of the games in question, and since I'm the host, and I'm usually the history guy, I should probably hand over to myself. Thank you, Andy.
I was really worried you were going to hand it over to like me or something.
Yeah, I
then, and
know,
I was
I
like,
was
like-
I have not prepared this.
Oh,
Please don't.
That
I was
would
like,
have been a good
don't
idea.
throw to
That.
me, don't throw to me.
That'd have been a really good idea. See who's been doing the research. No,
No.
You all know
you
it
do it
wouldn't be
for us.
me. So
no, true.
I can make up a history if you like.
No, it's fine.
Once upon a time.
So yeah, anyway, fuck's sake. Yeah, okay.
Segue.
So yeah, Final Fantasy was created by Hironobu Sakaguchi in 1997 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, The series became popular for its combination of sci-fi and fantasy elements, and incorporating a mix of mythologies from around the world. What made it stand out from other games in the genre was that every entry was a standalone story. It's like the Final Fantasy of that story, I guess. New characters, new stories, new worlds. It made the jump to the Super Nintendo with Final Fantasy IV in 1991, and Sakaguchi served as director for the first 5 games before he taking on a producer role and handing the reins of the series over to Yoshinori Kitase and Hiroyuki Ito, who would direct the series for the foreseeable future. They directed 6 together, but Kitase went on to direct 7 on his own, while Ito worked on Final Fantasy Tactics. The writer and designer of Final Fantasy VII, Tetsuya Nomura, had been working on the series since Final Fantasy IV, and he went on to create the Kingdom Hearts series and direct the Final Fantasy VII remake. The series, up to the point of Final Fantasy VII, had a really spotty release record in the West. The original Final Fantasy was released in North America over 2 years after the Japanese release, and it would not get a European release at all until it got a PlayStation remake in 2003. Final Fantasy II did not get a release outside of Japan until it was bundled with the PlayStation Final Fantasy I remake. Final Fantasy III also missed the West entirely. It got a handheld remake in the 2000s and early 2010s. If you were an American fan of Final Fantasy, you wouldn't get a follow-up to that game until Final Fantasy IV in 1991, and it was renamed Final Fantasy II in North America, and again, no European release. Final Fantasy V once again skipped the West. Final Fantasy VI was released in North America under the name Final Fantasy III. This is really confusing. So we get to 1997 and Final Fantasy VII is released for the PlayStation worldwide. So for American fans, this is the 4th Final Fantasy game, and for European gamers, it was the 1st. So like Final Fantasy VII was simultaneously the 1st, 4th and 7th game in the series, depending on where you were born.
Excellent.
So like thankfully, like because of the success of Final Fantasy VII, every game that followed was released worldwide, and all the games that came before it got releases, consoles and handhelds afterwards, usually in the form of polished up remakes, but there are fan translations available for fans who've got access to emulators if they want the true experience, but like none of that would have been possible without Final Fantasy VII. So going on to Final Fantasy VII, the reason we are here today, and really the reason I'm here today doing a gaming podcast at all, I would not be this into games if it wasn't for Final Fantasy VII. So let's talk about our first experiences with Final Fantasy VII, how we came across it. So Chip, since I know you're a biggest fan as me, let's start with you. How did you come across Final Fantasy VII?
Oh boy.
Clearing the throat because you're emotional.
Yeah, just sort of. I was just getting ready to talk, and I was like, "Yeah, this is gonna be a big one." So I came to it when I was about 14, and that would have been in 2001 when I had my PS1. So growing up, I didn't have access to a lot of different kind of video games. You know, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so maybe have 1 or 2 a year. And then a lot of my experience of playing games was around a friend's house. Like he had parents who had a lot more money, so I used to be like, I'm going to be your friend because I want to play video games, and you have a SNES and everything. So a lot of my experience from games came to that. So I was given Final Fantasy VII as a loan by a friend of my mum's husband. No, wait, my mum's friend's husband. Some bloke my mum knew. He lent me a bunch of games, and I'd never heard of Final Fantasy VII. I'd never played an RPG, let alone a JRPG, on nothing like that before. And then one day, just on a whim, I just kind of smacked it into the machine and started to play in it. And it's hard to think back now and kind of think about what it was that grabbed me straight away. It was like nothing I'd ever played before, because, my friend, he had like Tomb Raider and Resident Evil and stuff like that. So this was very, very different. And I think that's maybe what stood out for me, initially. So I played it through the opening couple of minutes and then instantly got stuck on the first boss, because apparently 14-year-old me couldn't work out not to attack when the tail was up, when it specifically said do not attack when the tail is up. So I played that first kind of half an hour or so, just again and again and again, and then couldn't get past the boss. And eventually I was like, oh, I don't attack when the tail is up. Okay, I understand now. And then from there, the game just kind of opened up, and that's when, you know, you meet all the characters and get to know them and just kind of really fall in love with the game. And inevitably, I got stuck again and was just dying all the time. I didn't know where I was going. You know, like, when you haven't played a game like that, I think sometimes coming to it and trying to work out the mechanics of it and how that world is supposed to work is really difficult. So I hit a point when I was in Midgar still that I just couldn't get past. I didn't know what I was doing. And then I had this really weird thing happen. I was in my granddad's car at one point. I can't remember where we'd been or where we were going. I was just sat in the front, and just being a bored teenager, I opened up the, what do you call it, the glove compartment, or whatever we call it in the UK, you know, the little section in front of the car?
The glove compartment.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I thought that was an Americanism, but there we go, the glove compartment, there we go. And just sitting in there was an extremely detailed walkthrough for Final Fantasy VII. And, like, I remember picking it up with all this, like, wonder in my eyes, like, where did you get this book? And why did you not tell me you had it before? And my granddad, like, he never knew anything about video games. It wasn't anything that we discussed or anything like that. Like, he hadn't bought it for me or anything. He was like, oh, I don't know. Like, he's a boxing coach. So he was like, oh, maybe one of the boxing kids left in it. Otherwise, I don't know. So it was just this complete mystery of where this walkthrough had come from, and I immediately, like, found the page of where I was stuck and was like, oh my god, I know what to do now. And that's how I was able to get through the game. Actually, that and the fact that I bought a cheat memory card where you can, like, just plug it into your PlayStation and it just gives you loads of cheats. So I had, like, infinity health and stuff like that. But it kind of glitched. So it gave Cloud infinite health, but it also meant none of the other characters leveled up. So there's a point in the game
Jesus
where any
Christ.
attack kills them instantly. And I know we'll talk about this later, but the end boss took me literal hours and hours because it was just Cloud versus Sephiroth and, like, no one to help. And much like Andy, you know, said at the start about how, you know, if it wasn't for this game, you know, we might not be here today. It's the same for me. Like, this is more than a game for me. It was a lifeline at the time. So I started playing the game when I was out of school. I left school when I was 12, didn't get back into education until I was about 16. I had no friends at the time. I would barely leave my room. You know, it's a very hard time, very difficult time for me personally. So meeting all these characters and getting this story, it's one of the times it's one of the real bright spots that I can pinpoint from my sort of early teenage years. And I liked video games until then, but this was the first time that I felt like I loved a video game, and I was so wrapped up in one that it just consumed me. And that has been my story with Final Fantasy for the last 20 years. That was my initial experience with it anyway, and that's why it's such an important game for me personally.
Well, it's going to be hard to follow that. So, Bash, how about you?
Of course, you'd come to me.
Because that's just who I wrote it down first. So.
I thought it was aggressively fine.
That is the perfect thing to say after that story.
I'm sorry. I am sorry.
Sasha.
No, it's fine. I'm
Is
fine.
Well,
You sound it.
when did you first play it?
So I tried it back in the 90s,
Okay.
a couple of times, and it just didn't do anything for me. And then I tried it again on the Switch last year, and it still didn't do a great deal for me. And then I played it for the podcast, and that is
love it, and it's your favourite game ever.
It's okay. Just let Chip hear what he wants to hear.
Thank you. I'd love an omelette right about now.
Oh, this is going to be interesting as it progresses.
Get someone else to make it. Right. Well, Becky, what about you?
I don't have a history with this franchise at all. I think I laboured under the assumption until very, very recently that all the Final Fantasy games were sequential. So now we were on, like, Final Fantasy 3 million. I was like, well, I'm never going to catch up, so never mind. And then you guys were like, we're going to do Final Fantasy VII for the podcast. And I went, but I haven't played the other 6. And then found out that, you know, they're standalones. I had no real comprehension of what I was getting into. And it took me a very long time to regress back to late 90s gaming. I really struggled with it at first, of the graphics and the gameplay and the mechanics of it, which I know we'll talk about later. But yeah, so it was an experience, I think, introing myself to Final Fantasy, specifically this one.
What sort of experience?
A mostly positive one?
No, I'm gonna stop that joke now because I think it's really cool that we finally have a game which I think we're gonna slightly disagree on in the friendliest way possible.
Yeah.
We're all coming at it from different experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like if you grew up watching Star Wars and then you showed it to somebody who'd never seen a Star Wars film before, and they just kind of went, "Yeah, that's fine," and then you feel like someone's punched you in the stomach, but really it's just the experience is different.
Yeah, I can take the pain of my friends not liking my favourite game of all time and just put it in a little shoebox and shove it under the bed.
Are you sure? Because you're bringing it up a lot.
Yeah.
It's all right, Chip. I'm here.
Thank you. Please tell me how your experience, Andy, because that will help me.
Well, I'll just talk about how I first played the game. I'll talk more about my emotional bullshit later on. I'm just delaying the inevitable. So it was 1997. This game was like all over the magazines and stuff. It was like a big deal when it was coming out. I was well aware of the Final Fantasy games before then, but I'd never played one because, like I said, they were only released in North America and there was only 3 of them released, and importing games was insanely expensive back then. Seeing a Nintendo exclusive coming to PlayStation, a console that I happened to own, it was like, wow, finally, I get to play a Final Fantasy game, and not just a Final Fantasy game, it would be like my first RPG, and so that was just really exciting. It was like it's hard to imagine now, like where like every genre is just everywhere, but like coming into a game like an entirely new genre for the first time, it was the great unknown. It was like really exciting and a little scary. Was it going to be worth it? And I was getting the game for Christmas, but because I was a little cunt, I knew where my mum was hiding the stuff. So there was no plastic wrap on the game because my mum obviously opened it to check all the discs were there, because there was a lot of discs, which was unusual at the time. And so I could just easily take it when she was at work. I'd take it out of the cupboard, play it for like an hour or two, put it back in. So like when it got to Christmas Day, I was like I think I was on disc 2 by then. So like my mum didn't have a clue though. She wouldn't have known how far in the game I was. So it's fine. So
you defend your surprise.
You do, yeah. I mean, I already knew I was getting it, but I just didn't let her know that I knew where she hid it. She wasn't a very good hider. So I was just like, she just assumed I was just really good at the game, like somehow, like on day one. So, wow, you're doing really good in these boss battles. It's like, yeah.
Kids are arseholes.
Yes.
Little Rebel would never be able to get away with that with me, though. I'd know. He keeps trying to call me a noob with gaming. I'm like, son.
To be fair, I watched your Minecraft Dungeon stream, and he was right on that occasion.
Yeah.
I mean, we've watched you stream a lot.
Well.
We will be talking about one of them some other time. So yeah, anyway, within minutes, I knew this game was like a big deal for me, and like I knew it was going to be one of my favorite experiences. Like I had no idea that how big a deal it was going to be, but I already knew like within the first like 10 minutes that this was something special. Let's get into the game itself and talk about the story, the characters, and the world building. So before we get into that, I've got a question from one of our listeners, Kaz Artwork on Twitter. Did you rename your characters? Yuffie is always renamed to Shampoo on each game I ever play.
I love that.
I want to know the story behind that. I want to know why.
I really wish, we should ask her afterwards.
Yes.
So I won't lie, I did at least one dirty name run on the game, like one of my repeat plays.
Is that supposed to surprise us?
No,
Yeah.
I just try to be honest here.
Yeah, okay.
But the one change I do remember making on my first playthrough, it was the only one I did. I renamed Yuffie to Buffy because it was the late 90s.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I can see that. I can see that.
It just made sense to me. I mean, the names rhyme. It wasn't that deep. But yeah. So anyway, did anybody? I'm assuming Chip. Yes, you would have renamed the characters at some point.
Yeah. Only on my initial run. So it's just first time, because it gives you the option to change the name. And I was like, my name's Cloud. Cloud's a rubbish name. I'm not going to use that. So I think I must have watched GoldenEye quite recently, because I renamed Cloud to 007. So you seemed a bit like a secret agent, sort of. I renamed Barrett Jackson, and I don't know why. And the only other character... Yep, and the only other character I renamed was Red 13, because I couldn't read Roman numerals back then. I didn't know what it meant, even though, WrestleMania used them all the time. I wasn't sure. So I renamed Red 13 Neil.
Now that is not a surprise at all.
Oh my god. Suddenly the Dungeons and Dragons names make so much more sense.
Hey, it's my uncle's name, so I was just inspired, I guess.
Neil.
He's not a big lion dog, but yeah.
Neil.
When you know everything you know about that character, like he's a great warrior and stuff, you're like, oh, Neil. Here comes Neil to save the world.
I want to fight alongside Neil.
Neil is going to be in my party.
And I think that's the, once a month I have to pick out a bad thing I've done in this game, so I think it's going to be that this month.
Just the absolute disrespect to that really good boy.
Oh dear.
So, also as a follow-up to that, unless do you guys have any names you've changed?
No, I kept them because I thought I'd get too confused on the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I kept them because I couldn't be bothered changing them.
I'm already loving Sasha's approach to this game.
I love it's such a Goldilocks episode, this one.
So yeah, there's a follow-up question from Crazy Merdav or Crazy Merde. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Crazy Merdav or Crazy Merdavi, whatever your name is. How did you originally pronounce the character names? Mostly I pronounced them right, except for Ket She, because I called them Kate Seif.
No, that's wrong. I'm sorry. I
looked it up. That's how you pronounce it.
I don't care. It's wrong. It's Kate Sith. I'm sorry. I will not change this. And it is Eris. It is not Aerith. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was also going to say, like, we all got Eris wrong because the localization fucked us.
No, everyone else is wrong. We're right.
But the remake changed her back to Aerith.
Don't care. Eris. That's her name. I know the name of my own wife.
Henry's there already.
Yeah, that took longer than I thought, actually, until Chip revealed his marital status.
Yeah. I don't know if I should point out that I mean Eris and not Kate Sith. I feel like that was obvious, right?
It did need clarifying, probably.
Okay, cool. Just checking.
The only other thing I got wrong was Mako. I used to call it Mako.
Yes.
Which is a pretty minor thing, but yeah, it took me like nearly 30 years to realise I was doing that wrong.
Again, I think we all did that though, right? Because it's Mako. It looks like Mako, but apparently it is Marco. Yeah. Also, I've heard people say Yuffie and not Yuffie.
No, it's Yuffie. I'm going to Yuffie.
Okay, good.
Do you know
Again,
it's,
we're right.
It's Chocobo, not Chocobo.
Chocobo.
I'm going to say Chocobo. I'm sorry.
No, but I was... Again, my investment in this is relatively low, but I know that it's Chocobo, not Chocobo.
Because it's the sound they make when they run. They go Chocobo, 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 Chocobo.
Uh-huh.
That's how I know.
But it's apparently said Chocobo.
I just
We're going to get a lot of angry tweets, aren't we?
Everything like Chip and Andy said it because I assumed they knew because they'd played it so much.
There's no voice track. It's only till the remake where we started hearing names said properly. And like a lot of the characters aren't in that yet. So it's not our fault.
I'm really worried we're going to meet Sid in the remake and it's going to be like, oh, hi, Darren.
No, because you're not in charge of naming things.
On to the character. We may as well just get into the main characters right now that we've talked about how to say their names wrong, or possibly right. Is there any favourites among the core cast? I know Chip's married to one of them, apparently, in his head.
Kate Sith.
Kate Sith. Ket She.
Am I allowed to talk about how much I love Sephiroth at this bit?
Not yet.
Okay.
You need to.
I just want to get that in there. Like,
We're going to get there.
okay.
It was like, oh, let's talk about the characters we love. Can I talk about Sephiroth?
No, I meant the core cast. The playable characters.
Oh,
Okay, that's fair.
I wish Sephiroth was a playable character.
So do I. I throw him off a fucking cliff.
Imagine all like the extra like hair flicks and things you could do. Be amazing.
Is this going to turn into a Sephiroth fan cast?
I'm sorry, I just love a hammy goth villain. Like,
I mean, speaking of hammy goths, Vincent Valentine.
yes,
Yes.
I love Vincent.
He's just
He's great.
so very... There's that bit near the end of the game where he does the backflip out of the scene just for no reason.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
like,
Cloud says everyone thinks he's cool.
Then he just backflips.
She's like, oh, am I? And then does a backflip across the airship.
yes, Vincent, yes, you are.
So I also love Yuffie and her, or Yuffie, or whatever you want to call her, and her chronic motion sickness. It's just a perfect character quirk for a game where you have to travel like a world map the entire time. Just, oh, I feel terrible. So, oh, poor Yuffie. Well, that's what you get for being a thief.
Yeah, we should probably mention her kleptomania as well, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
like famously.
She was a character that took me a long time to warm towards. Like, I think it took me a few playthroughs before I liked her. And there's even some where I've just never bothered to pick her up as well, because obviously she's one of the optional characters.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I got really lucky because I played it again, obviously, for this, and then I picked her up. Like, I came across... No, not came across her. I found
what
her
would
in a
Eris
forest.
say?
No, hold on. Oh, God.
What
This
would Kate Seath
escalated
say?
really quickly.
I found her straight away.
Just
Like, 'cause obviously you have to roam the forests of the world to try and
Pick her
find
up.
her. Yeah, and
You're just a Final Fantasy Lothario.
choosing my words very carefully right now.
You should. Go on, continue.
Oh, no, that's it.
Oh, that's it. Oh, never mind. I thought you were going to say more about who you wanted to pick up.
I'm a married man. Widowed.
I
Wait,
like.
I thought you said.
we'll get to
I thought
that.
you said weirdo. Then I was like, definitely
Oh,
not.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Yes.
definitely.
Yeah.
It took me a while to warm to Cloud as like a central figure, and I think it was only when Andy described him as like the perfect himbo that I was like, oh yeah, I get it now. And like sort of like as his story unfolded, I sort of warmed more to him, and like Tifa especially. I think like throughout the story, I really liked how their relationship developed.
Yeah, I really like Teeth. Like I think of this game, like a lot of people came across it when they were quite young, and like a lot of these characters became their first like big gaming crush. And I think Tifa was probably mine. I think Aeris was a better fit for Cloud, but I always liked Tifa more.
I like their friendship. I think it's a really nice
Yeah.
thing, like the way that develops through the story, and then obviously the revelations about their kind of, you know, how they knew each other before and their real history. Like, I think it comes together quite nicely.
Yeah, it takes its time with the friendship.
Yeah.
It's nicely developed.
And like the final, like right at the end when Cloud is having his identity crisis, like it reminded me of Willow and Xander at the end of season 6 when Xander's talking her down.
Oh yeah.
That kind of link to friendship and grounding an identity crisis in that kind of relationship.
The yellow crayon moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I liked how like the game like introduced you to the main four one by one. Like I mean Barrett's quite underdeveloped
Yeah.
for the first part. Like he gets a bit more depth as he goes along. And one thing the remake does a lot better is it fleshes him out more, gives him a bit more personality. But like Cloud and Tifa and Aeris get a lot of good time before the big crescendo of the first act in the Shinra building. So I especially liked Aeris' introduction when she meets Cloud in the church. I thought that was a nice little way of getting to know Aeris' character.
It's not really a character I dislike out of the playable ones, you know? Like, you know, I'd always have my set parties or anything like that, but they're all really unique. Like, they're all quite different from one another, which is really cool, especially Kate Sith, like, because it's just a robot cat and a big moog. Like, that's very different to the rest of them, you know?
Yeah.
I was not a fan of Sid. I didn't like Sid. He was just really horrible and rude to everyone.
Well, that's why I liked him. He was
Well,
just
yeah,
like,
obviously.
it was well not just yeah but yeah that I just like how every character brought a different dynamic to the group.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of variety in the characters. There's a lot of variety in the the non-playable characters, like the villains, like the Shinra board group, like there's a lot of different odious personalities there. Like, they could not be bigger Tories if they tried.
Oh yeah, it's our monthly Who's a Tory in this game. It's Shinra.
I promised Ben that I'd slam the Tories at least once on this podcast. So
Nice, easily done.
with the Shinra thing as well, like people gripe about like politics in gaming, acting like it's a new thing that's infecting the medium. But then you look at Final Fantasy VII with Shinra, like it's just staunchly anti-corporation. Like eco-terrorists are the heroes, and one of the key antagonists is a power company that wants to find paradise and strip of its resources to make a profit.
Yeah, no politics there at all.
No politics there. And they treat the poor like cannon fodder just to get their targets. Like when they drop the upper plate on the slums just to kill 6 people. It's like no politics at all. There's nothing right wing about the way they behave.
Oh God, Andy, can't you keep your woke agenda out of my game? Jesus Christ. It's interesting that they never address Avalanche kind of being terrorists and like the damage they do till quite late on in the game as well, because they kind of bring up like how many people do you think were killed in that reactor blast?
Yeah,
and it's they kind of later on in the game kind of realize like we've got to do things slightly different maybe, but again it's just a great part of that story is the journey that they kind of their outlook on life. It's very much sort of like, no, we're going to stop them or we're going to do this, to the point where they're like, no, we're going to save the world, but also our friendship is really important and the people around us now are really important, and this new family that we've all got is really important as well.
Yeah, and I think the story is still quite timely in a way that I wasn't expecting, especially with the idea of like the corporations consuming resources to the point of destroying the planet. I mean, obviously climate change and the global warming crisis was very much known about in the 90s. I remember being taught about it in primary school, but it didn't seem quite the same pressing matter that it is now. So that I felt very relevant while I was playing the game this time around. I've only played it once. What am I about?
Played it once.
At this time.
And now we've got all the talk about going to Mars and like starting up shop there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And like this in obviously in Final Fantasy VII, there was the whole space program where they were trying, like, Shinra were going to take over and like fly off somewhere else, but then they plot take so many fucking swerves. And they decide they're going to co-opt the space program and use it as a weapon instead, which is also taking things that are supposed to be peaceful and using them for bad things.
Yeah.
Nothing Tory about that. So in the Shinra building, like that whole section, that's where we first meet Red 13 and Professor Hojo, who like I think he's the real villain of the game.
Yes.
Because he does so many of the characters in the game, something like he's responsible for something terrible that's happened to them. Even Sephiroth. Like Sephiroth would not be the way he is if it wasn't for Professor Hojo being such a fucking cunt, basically.
Yeah.
That's fair.
He's
I
also
think
really
that's fair.
creepy as well.
He was a major creep. Like, who takes your pregnant wife and like starts, I know, I'm going to shower you in magic radiation and see what happens to our baby. Fucking monstrous. And he orphaned Aeris and he tortured poor Red 13.
And then tried to get him to bang.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Yeah. It's always when I read come out to it, I was like, oh yeah, he's a weird fella. Fella.
When I leave those scenes, I would just kind of tell myself, no, he was hoping Red 13 would attack her, but no, he was trying to get them to try to see what happens.
Yeah, he wanted to breed them because their races were dying out. And you're like, dude,
I don't think
come on.
I don't think he understands how races work. How's that going to help either
I
of
was
them?
really worried about where you were going with that then.
No, I'm like I say, I'm in deep denial about that scene. I'm comfortable even going into it now. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Chip, for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
So let's move along from that very quickly. So, like in this scene, like this section is also where we get our first like hints of Sephiroth, but we don't actually see him yet. There's the scene of the blood trail leading up to President Shinra, and this is one of the first big tonal shifts in the game, where it gets very, very sinister all of a sudden. It's like almost pivoting into like like a horror game. which is just completely unexpected when you've been playing up to a certain point. And I really liked how they kind of established Sephiroth as this like boogeyman, but you don't really see him until later on. It's just you wonder, oh god, who's this Sephiroth? He's obviously fucking nuts.
He's amazing.
I think
Is this where you want to go and tell us how much you love Sephiroth, Becky?
He's just so extra and compensatory with that massive sword, and I think it's hilarious.
yeah, it's such a good intro to his character, the Nibelheim flashback. It's like one of the first big things you do when you leave the world. It's even more interesting when you're replaying it and you're taking into account the unreliable narrator aspect, where you realise Cloud's memories aren't accurate at this point in the game, and like looking out for the real Cloud in his little uniform with his mask on, like just hanging around, like, oh, I want to be a soldier, but I'm crap at it. Sorry, Cloud, you've been through a lot. I shouldn't be so harsh to you. But yeah, I just loved Sephiroth's like gradual unraveling in the Shinra mansion.
Yes, I mean, it goes without saying, given my tastes, that was my favourite part of the game. Because great gothic mansion, there's a creepy cellar library, Sephiroth is just swanning about like this gothic prince of darkness effort. Oh, it's just great. I love that bit. Then there was the fire.
I was going to say, like, just the whole idea of, like, this guy just locked himself in a basement library full of, like, creepy jars and fucking dusty books, just reading all day and all night. Nobody goes down to bother him, and he's just going slowly insane down there, developing this massive messiah complex. And it's like, holy shit. It's really just so crazy and absurd, but kind of sinister at the same time.
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of establishing him as Antichrist figure almost, in that he thinks he's messianic, but is obviously just about to kill the world. And like, I love the shot of him with the fire burning in the background, where the music like really swells and it's all very dramatic. Yeah, I think it's a really good kind of setup for the rest of the story and for him as an enemy and an integral part of everyone else's journey as well.
This is really hard for me to talk about because obviously he killed my wife, so I'll just try and get through this as best as I can, I guess. No, he's awesome. It's I mean, like I was saying at the start, like, it took me so long to kind of progress in the game, so he was always this kind of presence that you never met, and you only heard a name and the reputation, and you saw the damage that he did, and with his like fucking massive sword, yes. So he, like, in my head, he kind of got built up really big before I even met him, and I think the actual reveal as well, it doesn't disappoint. Like, the setup works really, really well, and then where he goes after that and who he actually is, it just flows really nicely, and it's just, for me, he's one of the best. I mean, I know I'm biased because I love this game, but he's one of the best villains, I think, in games. Absolutely,
I think so. That he walks that fine line between being ridiculous but also pure evil. Like, some of the most entertaining villains are like kind of absurd but also extremely dangerous. Like, Alan Rickman was great at walking that line.
Yeah, it's
many
that
different
kind
roles.
Of like complete ham who can turn like on a dime into something really, really sinister and violent, and you're never quite sure, because they are so ridiculous, you're never quite sure when that turn's going to happen, which makes them all the more sinister.
Yeah. I think like one of my favourite bits in that whole bit in the library is where he's like because obviously it's quite primitive animation, he's like stomping down the corridor sort of thing, and Cloud just stood behind him like, what are you doing? And then he stops and says, out of my way, I'm going to see my mother. And then those chosen by the planet kicks in. Like, that's that theme, because like Sephiroth's got two themes. That tells you everything you need to know about him. he needs two themes to encompass how evil he is, and then he walks off, and you can't catch up to him. And by the time you get out of the mansion, everything's on fire. He just works fast. I know you have to take some kind of creative license there, but it just feels like everything just escalated as soon as he walked out of the mansion.
Oh, I could believe it of him as well.
Yeah,
I could believe he could just set a town on fire within 3 seconds.
Yeah, well, they establish how powerful he is, like what before he goes insane. That scene with the dragon that attacks you,
Yep.
He just takes that thing out with one hit. So, like, using the in-game mechanic that you're so used to, the combat system, to establish how powerful he is. That was a really good idea of that on theirs. They could have done that in a cutscene, but instead they used it in an actual thing that you think, oh, I'm going to have a fight with a dragon, and you do fuck all to it, and then Sephiroth just
die
Yeah, I was going to say, my
out of the
version,
way.
like, I got an attack in, and it was like 200
Pitiful.
hit points or something, and I was like, yeah, and then died. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
never mind.
And Sephiroth just wipes him out with one hit.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Cloud, I'll use my massive fucking sword.
It really is, like, hilariously large.
There's a lot of like weapon compensation going in the game, but Sephiroth's is particularly like his sword needs to be bigger than everyone else's.
Yeah.
Well, he goes for length and Cloud goes for girth, so maybe that's the difference.
Well, Zack went for girth. if we're being
That's
honest.
true, yeah. Cloud
Cloud just inherited
Zack's
Zack's girth.
Oh gosh.
Since we're talking about Sephiroth being the most evil bastard alive, it's probably time we get to the most evil thing he ever did.
Do we have to?
We do. I don't want to, but we do. But first, Becky, would you like to explain to us like how you experienced this like monumental scene in gaming history? Because it was something, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So when I was playing this game, I knew Sasha was playing it as well, but she was playing it a bit further behind. So I was messaging Andy and Chip with thoughts separately, and we got to the bit where it's the Temple of the Ancients first, isn't it? And then it's the forest where, or you go back. I can't remember.
I think it's the forest, then the Temple of the Ancients.
Okay.
You have to go through the forest to get there.
Yeah. So we'd had the big reveal that Kate Sith / was a spy, and they did the big sacrifice to let everyone go free. And Andy and Chip had said there was this big sad moment coming up, and I needed to prepare emotionally. So I was thinking, okay, well, that wasn't that sad, so there must be something else. And then you find out Eris has left, and she goes off on her own. And I was like, oh, and I knew it was to do with Eris, so I thought, well, that's it. And I wasn't that upset. I was like, oh God, am I really cold-hearted? Like, am I dead inside? And had a minor existential crisis because I was talking to the guys who were going, oh, it's so emotional. It's so, like, depressing. I'm so sad. And I was sat there going, I mean, it's not that bad. Like, she just...
That's because you came into the chat and you're like, I got to that bit, guys.
Yeah, because I
got
thought
to
it was that bit.
And we're like, oh, mate, are you okay? Like, oh, yeah, we know what it's like.
And then Chip mentioned, like, skewering Eris. And
He wasn't subtle about it at all.
like, what
It was
happened.
very clear.
But I didn't realise, because I misread that as, like, Cloud... Because Cloud attacks her in the scene before, when he comes to.
You thought Chip was being dramatic.
So, yeah, I thought Chip was being hyperbolic, and I was like going, I don't get this. So, it was late. I put the game down before you get to that bit. And I come back to it probably a couple of days later and go through the next bit where Eris is killed, and then messaged Andy and Chip like, wait, she dies? And they were both like,
What
yeah,
the fuck?
what?
Fucking deja vu. We've had this chat.
I don't
Have you
understand.
been in denial for this long, Becky? What the fuck?
And then it transpired that we'd been having two very different conversations. and to be honest, that made it all the more shocking because I was like completely not expecting it by that point. So yeah, it was an emotional
That was
roller coaster.
so weird.
But yeah,
Yeah, you said, "Oh, I'm crying now." It's like, well, we thought you were crying before.
I don't think we offered much sympathy at that point because we were like, we were done. We were over it. We'd been there for you at that time.
Yeah.
And then you were like, no, I need it now. We was like, no, we're done. We've given
you've
you
had that.
We can't go back and relive it now.
We were really sympathetic when you were just like, "Oh, you ran away in a forest."
like, oh, that's a bit sad. But yeah, like I had a
You
proper
two big
existential
wimps, what are you sad
crisis,
about
like,
that?
am I a sociopath? Like, am I just not
Or
experiencing...
are these two just a bunch of fucking pansies?
Or like maybe this was more impactful like when you were younger. Like I don't know.
It was a different time.
People didn't leave in the
Girls
90s.
running away in the forest was a lot more traumatic back in the 90s.
So yeah, it was an experience, and I'm still not quite sure how it happened, but
I really wish I'd got the transcript. Like, I would have just gone back and found it and just read it verbatim about what how the conversation transpired, where we were so clearly talking about Eris's death.
Like, what I think we should do is we should find that transcript and do a separate dramatic reading.
Ooh,
of
that
whole
would be
exchange.
fun. Especially me, like, arriving 2 days later, like, she dies? Because I think I did put it
2
all in
days
caps
later.
as well. I was like, what? So yeah, that was my experience of Eris dying. It was very different to everyone else's.
Yeah, I really wanted to lead with that because that's to soften what follows. So, Chip, why don't you talk about the death of your beloved?
Okay.
I'm only doing this because I don't want to talk about it yet.
Yeah, it's hard because it's a moment in gaming that still affects me to this day. Like, you know it's coming and you dread it coming, and then when it happens, it's just still really sad. Like all the character reactions, because you grow to love Eris, and kind of, she starts off with this kind of very innocent character, and then you learn that she's actually this ancient being, and or at least from a race of the ancients, and the way she connects to everyone and their reactions to her when she is skewered. The first time I played it, I bawled my eyes out. Like, because it's the first kind of death in maybe just media in general, like films, reading, anything like that just broke my damn heart. Like, it might be my first heartbreak as a kid, as a 14-year-old coming across this, and I still think it's an incredible scene. Like, it's 25 years later or whatever it is, and it's coming, and it still holds up. The power of that scene is still there, and I think that's a testament to the game and how kind of the quality of the writing and the characters, that it can still be so impactful. Going back and playing it today. My poor wife.
So, Sasha, did you burst open a bottle of champagne when Eris died?
No. I mean, for one thing, I'm allergic to grapes, and that would kill me. So
that's the only thing that stopped you.
What about a party popper then? Just like, yay, she's gone.
No, I feel like
just try to
me
stir up
saying
some
that
drama.
Just because I didn't love the game, it doesn't mean I disliked the game.
I don't. I'm taking the piss because I don't know Chip will be. It'd be funnier if following Chip's very sincere. It was
Is your
fine.
monthly picket you picketing this game outside my house?
This game is fine.
Can be.
This game is fine.
Aggressively fine.
But that's what makes it worse.
Did this scene touch you? Are you do you have human emotions?
I think that's a topic for a different podcast. Right, so I already knew. I knew the entire story of the game before playing this. I've known it for years.
Yeah, it's got a big reputation, that scene, especially.
It was a thing that I knew was coming almost to the point where I knew when it was coming as well. And I think there are certainly a lot of elements of the game overall in terms of gameplay and meandering elements that mean overall it sort of hampered my enjoyment of the game. So whilst it was sad and I did enjoy the story throughout, but that was a sad moment, I didn't cry. And considering I cry at every fucking thing and almost every day, Sasha's sad life.
Sasha's sad life.
Pick it up.
New segment. Well, we're pivoting into being a therapy podcast, so...
I cannot state enough that I really wanted to love this game because I know how much you two enjoyed it, and I know how much, even my partner, it's his favourite game in the whole world. But yeah, no, it didn't get me to the degree it did you guys.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Especially if you weren't into the game by that point. It's something you have to be really attached to Eris and all the other characters and be invested in the story to really take along with it. So for me, yeah, like with Chip, the death of Eris was possibly the defining moment of like gaming for me, and I know a lot of people it's the same way. Like you look at the YouTube comments of like a video of that scene, and there's people who like saying like 20 years later and it still hurts, sort of thing. It definitely, for me, it changed my perceptions on what stories in games could do and the effect they could have on me emotionally. Because like before that, like I was just playing like mostly like platformers and beat 'em ups and stuff where you don't really have characters die other than like Mortal Kombat, but that's kind of the point. So this was like my first experience of like grief for like a video game character, especially. It's something like games have done really well, like tapping into since, like Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Last of Us 2, like getting like. But this was like the first one for me, and I imagine for a lot of people. You spend so much time with this character, and then suddenly they're not there, and you start to miss their little interactions and their little mannerisms, and there's just things you're noticing aren't there anymore. And it really like just like stuff like her like gently teasing Cloud because he's super serious and brooding, or like offering support to a character. Yeah, it was a genuine feeling of grief at the time. I cried just like Chip, and I felt like distraught for a long time after it. I feel like it put me
now just hearing you say that.
It put me in a proper. I think it put me in the right mindset for the rest of the story, because the rest of the story is really about honouring Aeris and doing it for her, because like they've got to finish the job, because they find out that Aeris's plan worked and she had successfully reached the planet, but Sephiroth is blocking her spell from doing what it's supposed to do to save the world. So like I felt extra motivated to like kick the shit out of Sephiroth because we needed to make sure Aeris's death was for something.
Yeah, fuck Sephiroth.
Yeah.
And I mean, you speak about Sephiroth's theme as well. Her theme is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
I picked up, I don't think I have it anymore, but I had an album of a live orchestra performing the music from Final Fantasy VII, and that's that theme being played like that is...
I still get teary-eyed listening to it.
It's got that weird mix of being incredibly sad because of the attachments to it, but also it's just a really beautiful piece of music as well. And the orchestra version especially is just like stunning. I would highly recommend people seek that out if they can. I mean, I know we're going to talk about the soundtrack, but yeah, that's one of my particular favourite pieces of music from that game.
Yeah.
I think it's stunning, and I still get a guttural reaction to it whenever I listen to it nowadays.
I don't want to talk about the remake too much, but like seeing that when it gets to the bit when they're remaking the opening cinematic, and you see Aeris's face like in the Mako embers, and the music starts playing, like I like had a physical reaction to it. Like I started getting, I felt my breathing kind of.
Yeah, because that was the trailer as well, right? Or like the initial teaser trailer, the announcement trailer, whatever you want to call it.
As like my eyes like started welling, I was like, "Oh, she's back!"
Yeah,
like, it was like really, and like when you go back to her house and her music starts playing, like it's a really lovely reinterpretation of her theme.
Are you two okay? Do we need a minute?
We're
not supposed to get emotional until the end. I thought we penciled that in.
Well, no, I wrote again. Cry again. So yeah, it's just really like just it still hits me hard, like especially the music, like you said, that the theme just brings back a lot of memories. Okay, from one traumatizing sad moment to another. Chip, do you want to talk about Cosmo Canyon?
Do you know what? I do. I'm glad we're doing it in this order because, I mean, I cried in this game. I always cry in this game twice. And once is obviously with Aeris, and the next is in the Cosmo Canyon bit. I feel like we haven't spoken about Red 13 very much. Apart from the fact when we were speaking about him breeding with Aeris, just to bring that up again for Andy. But Red 13 is one of my favourite characters. And there's a section of the game when you go back to his hometown, Cosmo Canyon, you meet his grandpa, which I don't think is by blood, and you learn along the way that Red 13 is very angry at his father for abandoning his mother and the town during a big war, a big combat section, and his grandpa takes you on a little journey through Cosmo Canyon, through this big old vault, And it ends with Red 13 finding out that his dad is actually a hero who is still protecting the town, and he never abandoned them. And he does sadder woos, and it just rips my heart apart because it's so lovely, and it
is.
Sadder woos.
It's sad, and it's so hard to talk about because it's so gorgeous. And
the statue that his father turned into starts crying.
Yep, like me. God,
you're a statue that cries.
I am. At least this isn't tragic. Yeah, this is happy cries in a way.
Yeah, it's nice that he's reconciled his feelings with his father.
Yeah. One of my favourite sections of the game because it's just such a lovely, tender moment. And a game that has a lot of moments. This is a highlight one for me. Gets me every time. And the Cosmo Canyon theme, if we're going to talk about the soundtrack again, is just like, it's just a piece of music that I will find myself humming around the house just every now and then. It just burrows its way into my head and doesn't leave for a couple of days. It's one of the best pieces of music, one of the best sequences in the entire game. And yeah, I love it. I love Red 13. He's my boy.
I really couldn't add anything more to that. Yeah, you said it perfectly.
I think for me that moment hit me more than the heiress thing. To be
fair.
Thank
God! I really worried what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was very
nervous. I think the whole thing
pause.
was just a waste of my time. No,
That should be the trailer.
it's a waste of 30 to 40 hours, give or take.
The episode title in which Bash wastes her time.
Again, quite remarkable considering the amount of things I do waste my time doing. I really loved Red 13. You say he was your boy. I kind of, as character score would have said, he was my boy. I felt probably more invested in his character than several others. I don't know if that just says more about me and how I attach to animals. in any medium. I'm like, animal friends.
Animals.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Humans, bleh, no. Animals, yes.
Sadder woos.
Sadder woos.
I mean, if we want to talk about names as well, I mean, do you think there's purists out there? They're like, no, he's not Red 13, he's Nanaki. That's his actual name. Please don't call him Red 13.
There will be, but they can fuck off.
Hey, at least we're not calling him Neil, okay?
No, I staunchly refuse to call him Neil.
I'm going to call him Neil if I ever play this game again.
The next time you play it, you won't be able to unsee that.
Yeah, no, it'll be Neil now from now on.
When you play the remake, you'll be like, oh, there's Neil.
Yeah. Oh, Neil.
What's he doing to Eris? Oh, no!
Sadowoo.
Like Chip said, Cosmo Canyons are just one of the highlights of Final Fantasy VII. There's a place to visit. There is a lot of really memorable, like amazing places to visit in the big world of Final Fantasy VII. So they've all got a very distinct identity, which I really like. They're like the Midgar slums and like the upper part of Midgar are like worlds apart, and then you've got like Nibelheim, which is like a little quaint little village. They've got Junon, which has got like a little fishing village underneath, and then this big like fucking fortress on top. And there's like the Golden Saucer, Costa del Sol. They all feel like distinct, and that's what I love about this game. Like with a lot of world design in games, there's a tendency to make everything connect and like make sense, and that's just not really how these things work. Like in games like The Witcher 3 or even like Final Fantasy 15, they have a habit of trying to make sure everything feels like it belongs beside each other, and it just feels quite homogenous. Even in the best possible open world designs, there's that sort of feeling of sameness. Whereas with like Final Fantasy VII, I feel like it's more plausible. Like, 'cause we don't really live in a world where everything looks the same. You go to any corner of the world, and you're going to see things that aren't possible, like back home. It's like almost like a completely different planet you're going to, and that's what makes like the world of Final Fantasy VII feel so like big and unpredictable and alive.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm that there's nowhere in Sheffield that they do chocobo racing. So,
Have you looked?
No.
Yes.
So how can you confirm it then?
Oh my god. I'll be right back.
So has anybody got any highlights of places to visit in Final Fantasy VII? Any other than like Cosmo Canyon that was already mentioned?
Not like specific places, but I really enjoyed how you interact with the world map. Because you remember on like ITV when they did the weather reports on like the massive, like floating.
Oh
Great
yes,
Britain,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
people would fall in. Like that's what I felt like running around as Cloud on that massive world. Like I could just hop over and be like, "Oh, the sun is shining in Nibelheim today."
Well, yeah, it's on fire.
Oh, dark.
This was not a comparison I was expecting tonight.
No, but that's how it felt. Like, because he was so big and it looked like he could just step. Like, it really annoyed me when I got to a stream and it was like, you can't cross this. It's like, are you kidding? He is a giant. Like, he is taller than the houses. Come on, he can step across the river.
Marching through a model village.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it felt like. So yeah, that was my comparison. ITV weather forecasts.
So with that world map, I when I was a kid, I felt like that was the biggest thing I'd ever seen. Like holy shit, this world is massive, and it felt at the time. It's how I feel about an open world game. Like now, like I can explore everywhere, but like when you go back to it, it's a very linear map. Like you can only really go to like once you've left one place. There's really only like one or two other places you can go. But at the time, it felt like I had an entire world to explore. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I didn't even consider like how they designed it to like funnel you through. It just felt like I was exploring it on my own volition. It's probably easier to see the tricks being played now with the way the open worlds have changed. But at the time, I was like completely suckered in. I thought I was finding these things like organically.
I'm really glad it was linear because I'd have got lost. I did get lost. I went back into Midgard like 3 times before I realised where I was supposed to go.
I flew past Midgar a lot when I was in the airship. I was like completely lost. Like, where the fuck is the goddamn Temple of the Ancients? And I kept flying past the wrong place. Like, no, it's not there. Fucking. And is this it? It's in the middle of nowhere. No, that's fucking Golden Saucer. Jesus Christ, where is it?
That's definitely a thing that gets me. Like, I know the game really well up to a point, and then I just have to start looking at like walkthroughs and stuff like that just to make sure. So it's when you get to the high wind and when you get the submarine as well. The submarine especially, because obviously you can't see necessarily where you're going, and some of the gaps under the water are very small. Like when you get to the little Vincent side section where he meets his former love and Sephiroth's mum, that took me so long to find, even with a guide to telling me how to go, because it's not easy to find in the submarine. And then trying to just get about, because obviously once you're in the high winds, you can go absolutely anywhere. It's all open to you.
Yeah.
And I found that very confusing at times. It's like, where? Like I know where some of these things are, but what is that dot the where I want to go? What is this one? I don't know if I've been here yet. How do you get to Wutai? Because it's there, but you have to land away from it to actually go there.
Yeah, I missed having a map with names on it. I had many tabs open while I was playing this game,
yes.
like various different walkthroughs, and one of them was just a map with the place names on it, because I've got so used to games now, like showing you objectives, showing you where to go, naming things on a map as you would expect, that I remember like trying to navigate this one and I'd just be like, I don't know what the dots are. Like, which dot am I supposed to be going to? And then obviously you get the blue dots to represent the different bits of transport. But I didn't read that. I was like, why are there now blue dots? Do I need to go to the blue dot? Like, what is happening? So
yeah, and you all you get is like a character briefly saying, "Oh yeah, Sephiroth went south to Nibelheim," and then you're like, "Okay, but where is that?" No, I'm not going to tell you. You must find it now.
You will have no help whatsoever.
You're on your own, fucker. That's like most 90s games, really. They're just like, you're on your own, fucker.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like, good luck.
Most 90s games. You're on your own, fucker.
You mentioned briefly there my 2 least favourite words in gaming. Which I don't know if this is the right place for me to maybe bring up my criticism of the game.
I like the quiver in your voice.
Yeah, it's like, is this the audience?
Safe space?
It's like you heard me reach for the bat.
Just a disclaimer, there will be no violence between hosts on this podcast.
No, we can't guarantee that.
Just emotion. It's going to be purely emotional violence.
So I think this hampered my enjoyment of the game a lot. The fact that it's a linear game hiding behind the idea of being open world but not actually being open world. And so for me, it felt like whenever I was meandering about, sort of, you know, feeling a bit directionless, it felt like I wasn't progressing. If you weren't moving through the story, you weren't progressing. I 100% would not have done this game without a walkthrough, but what I find really interesting is even people who have played it and loved it can't or don't choose to do this game without walkthroughs. I think that says a lot about the game. I'm sorry. I think, well, as someone who is obviously... Oh, yeah, no. And I think, though, it feels like a valid reason for me to come into this and try playing it again now, to just look at it and go, I understand why this wasn't for me in the 90s, because I just felt frustrated playing it. And now, the hook never really felt like the gameplay. It always seems to have been the story. And so those open world elements, but they're not really truly, because you couldn't really go back to stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that was like kept behind gates, like, so whether it was characters or whether it was, you know, little bits that you could be given. And I just think, even looking at this through the eyes of, obviously, I feel quite passionate. I know we all do, but I see things through that eye because my son, being autistic, I see things through the idea of accessibility. And I don't know if it's because I'm sort of neurodiverse myself. I totally, like, can understand and identify quite acutely why this game didn't work for me. I found that quite a frustrating part of the game, that it had the idea of freedom, but it wasn't actually free. And if you got lost, it just felt like you were just then stuck in a limbo in the game until you worked out what you were doing, which I totally understand is really great for a lot of people who love that, and that's fine. I'm all for it. It just, yeah. I couldn't play it without cheats, and I couldn't play it without a walkthrough. Sorry.
No, don't apologise. Like, I think it's a very fair criticism.
I when I first played it, I didn't need a walkthrough. Like, I just kind of like instinctively went along with it. I understood where I was supposed to go next, all these things. But coming back to it after several generations of like gaming evolving and changing, like different quality of life additions to games, like Becky said, like objectives and markers on maps and stuff like that. Now I have to play it. I do have to constantly like address like a guide to work out what I'm supposed to do next. Even a game I know the story, like I know how it plays out, but it's remembering how to get to the next stage. I'll get lost, or I'll need help, like making a timed jump like on the wall to leading up to Shinra Tower. I remember like I could do that perfectly when I played it as a kid. Playing it now, I had to check a Reddit to find out how to make a jump, to like, because I was using like a modern sensibility of like following my eyes and like timing the jump like that. But what I was supposed to be doing was I was supposed to listen for the sound and then react to the sound, and I wasn't doing that. I was like I was in a modern mindset, and it was something I had to kind of, on this replay, I had to kind of start to like deprogram a lot of my modern sensibilities, like Becky said, like to like started getting rid of all of these, like letting go of the comforts that I was used to, and kind of going into a game that's a lot more unforgiving and a lot more like obtuse. Yeah. At the time, that was very like, it was a very appealing thing, having a game that was just like, it demanded your entire focus, because I had a lot of free time. So like I was perfectly happy to like just throw myself into it.
I don't even know that it's a modern versus retro thing, because I play a lot of retro games. I play, this generation especially, much like I think many of us, this was kind of my, maybe a little bit earlier, because it was SNES, arguably, but like PlayStation 1 was like when I, got pulled into gaming hook, line and sinker sort of thing. Yeah, I think for me, like, I turned off the random battle stuff because that just felt like fighting with no purpose, and so it didn't feel fun. And I guess I'm an impatient person these days, and maybe some of that is a side effect of leading a very busy life these days. Yeah, I just think it didn't feel super accessible even with cheats and stuff on, like I say, I very much had to refer to walkthroughs, and like it's a gaming experience in and of itself. It's not even one I've really experienced with other JRPGs, because I've played quite a few, and it's a genre that I generally love. That was where a lot of my frustration was born, was because it actually is a linear story, but it just felt like there was stuff to miss because they kind of built in open world elements, but it wasn't actually really that. So I found myself getting frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think, and I said this earlier, that it took me so long to get used to the mechanics of it and the gameplay style, that I think had I not been playing it for the podcast, I don't think I would have carried on, because I did find it frustrating. I developed a twitch whenever the random encounters kicked off.
Everybody has a twitch, yeah.
Yeah, and just having to work within a map that was both 3D and 2D at the same time. Like the bit where you're trying to make your way through to the market, and you've got that pipe and you have to go underneath something to go up something and down something, and
oh Christ, yeah.
Yeah, and I just couldn't click into seeing where things were interactive. Like for me, I love open worlds and I love RPGs in a contrast to Sasha. So it was sort of surprising to me that I didn't get to grips with this as quickly as I thought I was going to. I'm glad I've played it because I enjoyed the story and I liked the characters, but the mechanics of it did really put me off at first. And even then I had to switch on cheats. I had walkthroughs. I was asking you guys for advice when I got stuck. I'd like to have games that challenge me, but I like to feel like I can overcome that challenge and I'm not just sort of running around in circles as a giant person on a map, not really knowing where they're going.
I think they're both very fair criticisms of the game. Like, it's obviously hard for me and Andy because we're so ingrained in this game. You know, it's not even this style of game, this game in particular. Because I know that I've gone back and tried to play Final Fantasy... Wait, which one's Blitzball? Is that 9 or 10?
10.
10. I've tried to play 10 and I tried to play 15 and never finished either of them. And, you know, I remember going into those games thinking, this isn't Final Fantasy. Like, I've played 1 and I'm like, this isn't Final Fantasy because it's not the same mechanics as 7.
It's not the one you want.
Yeah, and I couldn't imagine trying to play this game, like, for the first time nowadays without having that affection for it and trying to get to grips with everything, because that game has so much. Like, yeah, it's got this,
it's very
linear
dense
story.
Game.
Yeah, and there's so much to it, and there's so much you can miss. Like, even playing it around this time, having played it as many times as I have, there were a couple of scenes that I saw that I was like, I've never seen this before. This is really cool. There's a scene with Cloud and Zack in a truck, and I was like, I have never seen this. This is amazing. It blew my mind a little bit. And I just think there's so many switches like that in the game with things you can find, things you can do. Like, working out, if you're playing this game without cheats, trying to work out, you know, how to beat an enemy and its weaknesses and stuff like that could easily take you 4 or 5 goes. And with a system that uses save points as opposed to save anywhere, that could be incredibly frustrating. And I totally understand those criticisms completely.
I had completely forgotten the trauma of save points. I'm so used to auto saves now, or being able to just save the game, that getting used to, if I died, I would go back to the last save point. And the first time it happened, I must have lost a good hour of gameplay. I must have sat there on my sofa like, oh yeah, oh no. So at that point, every opportunity I got, I was like, save, I'll save again just to make sure, save a third time just in case. So yeah, I think I've got 3 different versions of the same game because I was just saving it so many times.
I think as soon as I saw how many save points there were, it just put the fear in me. And so automatically I just went into we've only just done a thing 2 minutes ago, and then we're walking past the save point again, but let's save.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was I'll go 5 feet or something on the world map and save immediately before I enter a new place, or just I'm nowhere near a new place, but I'll still save just in case.
Yeah.
Just in case some monster comes out of nowhere and attacks me. Yeah, I think it's just a thing with that time they had save points, the Resident Evil games were defined by save points, and you have to you have to be strategic about when you save, and this
Yeah,
is
like resource
yeah.
management and saving the game at the right point where your inventory is good enough for whatever comes next. Like things like
Yeah.
that I've just not necessarily forgotten, but it's just something that you don't necessarily have to think about with a lot of these games now. You have quick save features. You have, you can load up a save from like a couple of hours ago if you really mess up. Whereas this, it felt like the stakes were that much higher because it was fixed.
Yeah, this kind of brings me to how I kind of tripped myself up with save points when it came to the boss battle that I got stuck on for what felt like a month. It was entirely possible it was just a long weekend in December because it was the Christmas break, or it could have been a week, but it felt like a lot longer because I'd done my save, and like normally I'd be saving multiple times, like multiple save slots. But because back then, like, you had limited save space on your memory cards, I started dedicating more of my time to one save slot, and there was a 5-hour gap or something between the two, the first one and the second one. And I got stuck on this boss battle I encountered. It was in the underwater reactor, and it was a carry armor, that like robot that looks like kind of a robot crane that you fight before you get to the submarine.
That's quite a tough section, that bit.
It was a lot tougher than it should have been, though. 'Cause, I was getting really close. Like, I didn't realise that I was too low a level and I didn't have enough potions. Or that maybe I did realise it and I was just being extremely stubborn. But I just kept trying different strategies, timing my health, my health potions and stuff differently. And I kept coming short every time. It got to a point where I started thinking the game's music is psyching me out. So I turned the game's music off and I started playing like whatever CDs I had. I listened to a hell of a lot of the Verve's urban hymns in that fight during that fight scene. To the point where I can't hear The Drugs Don't Work without seeing that fucking battle appear in my brain. It's ruined a lot of great 90s Britpop songs, like that fucking boss battle. I even tried meditating before fights because I thought I needed to clear my head and change my mindset, and it didn't work. I did everything except accept my fate, go to the 5 hours ago save point, level up a lot more, and buy a lot of potions. I just kept refusing to do it, and at a certain point I was like, I'm not getting any younger. I've got to just do this. It's 5 hours. I'll do it. I'll spend like 6 hours like leveling up or something like that. And yeah, by the time I met it again, I killed it the first time I tried. I was like, really? It was that easy, was it? It took more time than the fucking Sephiroth final boss battle. I was like, oh my god, are you fucking kidding me? I'm still traumatized by that whole scene.
It's like this is your real heartbreak of the game.
Before we move on from like the gameplay stuff, there's a question from the Enigma Griff on Twitter. Who was your ultimate three? For me, it was Cloud, Sid, and Vincent.
Ooh, that's an interesting mix.
Ooh.
Becky, who was your core three that you used?
Cloud, Red 13, and Tifa.
Sasha, did you have a preference?
Weirdly, it was the same as Becky.
Yes.
Yeah.
High five.
Chip?
High five.
I had two. So I had Eris and Red 13, and I had Barrett and Tifa.
So I was a pretty basic bitch for this whole thing. I mainly stuck to the core group. It was Barrett and Tifa alternating, and Eris was like a fixed party member because she seemed the most important to the story, but she was also like helpful for healing back when you didn't have the cheat mode to save your ass.
The limit break and stuff. She was. Yeah, that was me as well. Until
for a while, and then Tifa and Barrett just they took the spot. But I had to basically change my entire combat philosophy once I didn't have Eris to help save my ass in a fight. But apparently I didn't take it on enough because by the time I got to carry armor, I still wasn't healing myself properly. So I was still grieving, I think. We've talked about how the game plays and we've talked about the story, so let's talk about the other element that is what makes the game so important historically. It's the visuals and the sound. So first of all, we'll start with a question from friend of the podcast, in inverted commas, Ben, Duke of Bellingham on Twitter. Why does everyone remember this game fondly when it looks like turd now? Final Fantasy VI for the win.
Can you ban someone from downloading a podcast?
I'm going to try.
You can.
First of all, fuck you, Ben.
I agree.
And I don't have a second thing.
No, that's enough. I think you've said it all there.
Have you though?
Yes.
Have you though?
Yes.
Have you, though?
I mean, we can say it again if you want. Fuck you, Ben.
It's just something that, like, it's like context and everything. Like the game was a game changer visually at the time, and it's like maybe it doesn't look as good as some of the games that followed almost immediately in that generation. Like Final Fantasy VIII already looked like a quantum leap ahead of Final Fantasy VII, but at the opening sequence, like the introduction of like blending in-game graphics and with the cinematics, it was revolutionary really at the time. It completely blew my mind. It changed how I thought games could tell stories. There was nothing like it at the time really. Like they did it a lot throughout the game, but I think the opening with the train station and everything like that, that's the one that sticks in my head the most. Like it was something new entirely. The remaster kind of lets it down a bit because the character models are a lot cleaner and the pre-rendered backgrounds, so it stands out a lot more. But like the original, like there was less of a clear distinction between the environments and the character, so it kind of blended a bit better, or as good as it possibly could at the time.
And there's 6 or 7 like special cutscenes in that game where it's like at the time I was like, well, games are never going to look better than this. It's like when you do the escape from the Shinra headquarters at
I was
the
going to mention
Midgard bit. Like it looks so good, and like, well, I mean, it doesn't now, because when it came up, I was excited for it. I was like, oh yeah, here comes that bit that I really love, and it's like, it kind of looks like us now, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
at the time it was amazing, but like now they move stiffer than a starched corpse. It's like,
I was always so excited for those moments whenever they popped up as well. It was like, oh, it's the bit where it looks like human flesh, and it's like, oh no, things have changed. They've moved on.
Now, I like in hindsight, I would have preferred they just stick with using the character models. For a lot of the stuff,
jarring.
I would have honestly preferred that because it was visually consistent, and they had already shown that they could do like quite dynamic stuff with it, like in terms of like camera angles and cinematics and stuff.
Yeah, I found the transitions quite jarring. Especially because, like, with the arms in game look like rolls of plasticine that just got squished in the middle. And it was quite jarring to go from, like, squished plasticine arms to arms that looked like arms. And yeah, it just, like, I can see why it was revolutionary at the time and why it was such a big deal. But yeah, I think it's one of those decisions that maybe in hindsight hasn't helped the game age quite so well.
No, games will never look better than this. This is the best looking game ever.
Okay,
Look, the polyhedron characters are very cute, right?
Yeah, like they're a good, like they're as good a possible way of making those at the time 16-bit designs like 3D. It was they tried,
but it does look like turd.
Can you ban someone from co-hosting a podcast?
We can.
No,
we
you
can
can't
try.
ban Sasha. If you get rid of Sasha, you get rid of me, and then it's just you
Thank
two
you,
farting
Becky.
about.
Well, tune in next month to mine and Andy's podcast about Final Fantasy VII.
I still like the character models. Like I mean, they've got a charm to them, especially when you get close-ups and you can see like the eyes and the mouth, like kind of like look like they're drawn on almost. But like I like the animations like of those characters. They're very basic, but Barrett when he's in a rage is like, and like you see Red 13 like scritching his own ear, or like Aerith putting her hand behind her back and stuff like that.
Red 13's walk when he's trying to be a human is possibly the funniest moment of the game, and one like I really wanted to replicate, just like around my house, like wiggling. It was great.
Well, no one's stopping you, Becky. You should definitely do that.
I probably will, to be honest.
Just on that, while we're talking about Red 13 dressed as a sailor, we need to talk about Barrett dressed as a sailor.
Oh, he's so cute.
Because that's a thing that I'm here for.
That was very amusing. Especially because he's really angry at that point in the story as well, isn't he?
When is Barrett not angry?
And so cross.
That's just kind of, it gives me flashbacks to my, like, one of my auntie's weddings, like, where I had to dress up like a sailor, and I was furious about it. I was very young, just to clarify. This wasn't recent.
No, sorry,
Andy.
that's my visual now.
Headcanon now is that I did it in my 30s.
It was a year ago, and it was exactly the suit that Barrett was wearing in that scene.
Yeah, and you just looked furious throughout the whole thing.
It was that same kind of suit.
Amazing.
I still really love the combat like graphics. I still think those models are beautifully like rendered, especially like in the remaster. The remaster does a good job of those. I think like cleans everything up really nice, so you get to appreciate all the work that's gone into those characters, and the very strange monsters.
At last, can I ask my question,
Becky.
please?
Yes.
Why was there a man in a teapot burping at me?
The answer is why not?
And also, why was there a house attacking me?
Because sometimes houses are scary.
And there was a giant egg for no apparent reason.
Yes, that was strange.
It's the Marco.
Yeah, it does some crazy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to know what the designers were on that whole
I don't know
time.
if you do.
So you can have some more, so you can avoid it.
Both. Just insanity. Like the biker truck thingy.
Oh yeah, the thing that was like a monster, but it was also like a bike.
Yeah. Chip, you bought a vending machine at one point.
Yes, I did.
Why
Yes,
was
I
there a
did.
vending machine?
I don't know.
I love all those
Marco.
designs.
I have so many questions, and none of them are answered in any of it, other than
It's so
just Marco.
unapologetically weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, this is the way it is. So get on board or get killed by a house.
And we'll turn you into a frog.
Oh, the frogs were so confusing. Red 13 in mine spent most of the Sephiroth battle as a frog because I didn't realise that's what had happened and was just like missing it in the animation every time he was going around and was like, why is he only doing 1 HP damage? Like, this is ridiculous. And I had the cheats on as well, so like he should have been doing more. And then it panned round and I was like, oh, he's a frog. Wait, what?
Yeah, I completely forgot about the frog thing, like, on this replay. I equipped everybody with stuff to protect them from, like, silence and falling asleep and stuff like that. I completely forgot to equip anything that would stop him from turning into a frog. So, like, Cloud got turned into a frog when he was battling Sephiroth. And I was really concerned that when it gets to the final confrontation, where they're facing each other and, like, Cloud's about to let rip with the Omni Slash, that he'd be a frog for that part. So, oh, thank God they changed him back to normal. So that'd kill the drama for me a little bit.
Just
or possibly make it better.
I don't know.
I
think I quite want to see Frog Cloud swinging a massive sword at Sephiroth.
Yeah.
I think that would be amusing.
Can we talk about the summon animations as well?
Oh,
because I
yes.
still think they are great.
Oh
I
yeah,
love
they're
the
still really
summons.
cool. I really like the idea that halfway through a battle you can just summon a god, like
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty handy.
Yeah.
It's pretty handy.
casually, like
Odin! Hear my
Surprise.
call! Now we're going to talk about the music of Final Fantasy VII, and honestly, I just love everything on the soundtrack. Like, every single theme, basically.
yeah, I really really enjoyed the score and the kind of how it copes with the tonal shifts, especially when you go from something like the marketplace where it's all like funky tunes to like battling Sephiroth where it's like full on choral Carl Orff
Yes.
nightmares.
Yeah, you're right about, like, the tonal shifts, like going from Costa del Sol to, like, the Shinra theme, like, in the same scene, like, Shinra arrive at Costa del Sol, and all that happy music suddenly, dun, dun, dun. Oh, God. The bad guys are here
They're
to ruin
here.
our beach holiday. Like, the Chocobo music, and then there's, like, obviously, like we said, Sephiroth's got 2 themes, because
Yeah.
he's so evil, he needs 2 themes.
He's so extra.
I loved those chosen by the planet. That's my favourite one. The one where when he's gone insane. But also One Winged Angel is just so ludicrously arch. It's just perfect for It's just perfect for a guy who's
him all
got a
over.
literal god complex. It's just
I love the boss theme as well. Like when you meet a boss and it goes into it and it's like, oh, it's like, yes, come on, I'm gonna fuck up this giant monster. Let's go.
And then
Yeah.
you die.
And then you die. It's this may be a surprise, but it is my favorite gaming soundtrack of all time.
Colour
I'm
me
shocked.
surprised.
I know. I'm just gonna let it hang out there for a second. Yeah, I love it. I love every single song on it. I will not skip past a single one.
whenever I do something well in my life, I do like to hum the victory fanfare. I don't use it very often.
Oh, well, that got sad really quick.
Well, a lot of the game's quite sad. There's a lot of my favourite themes in the game are like melancholic. Like the prelude, like the first bit of music you hear, is very it's got like a sadness to it, but kind of hopeful. Like Eris's theme's the same kind of way. Tifa's theme is just very, I don't know, it's how do I describe it? Like a sad memory. That's what it kind of sounds like. Like you're remembering something sad from your life.
Oh.
There's a lot of that in the game. Like, and there's all the more lively stuff like Cosmo Canyon and the Golden Saucer stuff.
Oh, do you know what? I think maybe the Golden Saucer one, I do love it, but maybe it's my least favourite because that is one that really burrows in your brain. Like that one
Yes.
stays there.
So we've kind of covered everything with the game up to this point. So let's kind of wrap things up a bit. So let's have our final thoughts. Let's go with Sasha first, just so she doesn't get like thrown under the bus following Chip.
I feel I hit my final thoughts right up at the start.
Yes, your final thoughts were your first thoughts.
Yeah, they were. It was fine. I liked the story, but I could have done without the majority of the gameplay, and it just wasn't. Yeah, I found the gameplay just hampered my experience of it, and that was even with a whole bunch of stuff to make it more accessible. It weren't for me, and I think that's absolutely more than fine. There are other RPGs and JRPGs that use, the same battle systems that I like better, and I think that's fine.
Says you.
Yes, says me.
So-
I'm
So,
really
Chip,
sad
I was gonna
that
let
I
that go.
don't feel the way that you guys did, and I'm
No,
sorry.
I don't think anybody would have expected that, to be fair. Like it'd be very difficult for you to have that same attachment that we have.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised if anyone played it for the first time nowadays and felt about it the way we do. Like that would surprise me a lot if that was the case.
Yeah, like I said earlier on, like it's like Star Wars. You need to experience it your way to get that attachment. You can't just have somebody say, "Here's this thing that's really important," and then expect them to be able to have that same reaction. You've got to accept that people come at things from different perspectives, but you're still wrong. I just had to throw that in there. No, I'm kidding. So, Chip, your final thoughts?
Pretty much the same as Sasha.
Liar.
No, this is clearly this is more than a game for me. It came to me at a very pivotal point in my life. It did very good things for me at that pivotal point in my life. I love it. It's my favourite game of all time. It will never not be my favourite game of all time. It means a lot to me, a great deal.
You got me emotional there, Chip. Becky, what about you?
I'm so happy you put me following Chip.
I've done it to Sasha too many times.
I like the story and I like the characters, and I'm glad I played it. I'm glad I have the knowledge of it now, as it was such a pivotal game. But it's not for me, I think, is the most diplomatic way of putting it. I think I found it a bit too frustrating and a bit too challenging. But like I said, I'm glad to have had the experience.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, I think for me and Chip, what we feel more strongly about is the story and the characters. For me, like Final Fantasy VII is it's beautifully melancholic, is the way I'd put it. Like almost all of the characters in the game, they're like wounded in some way. Even the villains, and like as a kid when I first played it, they were all just kind of cool, tragic sort of characters that I'd latched onto. because I just liked how they looked and how they acted and things. But as like the older I got, the more like hurt and sadness that I accrued through life. Like the more meaningful the characters became and the story became. Because like, through all of the wild plot twists, and like because there's a lot of plot twists, and like the manic tonal shifts that you have to like just hold on to like try and keep up with, it's basically like it's a story about healing. That all the characters are trying to like make sense of their world, like the things that have been taken from them, the things they're trying to fight to hold on to. Like even the planet itself is it's wounded and it's trying to heal itself. And it's really rare for a game from my like youth to have like grown more meaningful and more valuable to me as a person, like the older I get. But this is one of them. Like it's like Chip said, it's more than just a game. It's beyond measure what I can say what this game means to me. Throughout my entire life, it's been something really special. It changed everything for me. It changed how I perceive video games as an art form. It changed my relationship with gaming. It took gaming from just like a hobby to a passion. It's like the reason I write about games. It's the reason I'm doing this podcast. And like without games, I probably might not have met you guys. And like that is just unthinkable. And so, what can I say really? Like when I loaded up the remake, I don't want to talk about it that much, but I think it's when I heard the prelude again, and I cried when I heard it, because like before up to that point it had been like a rough few years, and it was the start of what felt like it was going to be a really hard year, and holy fuck, I had no idea how hard. And the feeling that came over me was like it was like finding home again after being lost for a while. And like not like the physical structure or anything like that, but the state of feeling somewhere familiar and somewhere safe. And that's like Final Fantasy VII to me. It's my anchor to feeling safe and happy. So there's nothing else like it in the medium, or any medium, that will mean as much to me as Final Fantasy VII. Not Star Wars, not Spider-Man, like things that have like meant the world to me. None of them can touch Final Fantasy VII. I loved this game up like once a year, and like any hurt I might be carrying at the time, it just peels away for a while, and then like I just feel like that kid again, whose biggest problem in the world was fighting that fucking robot in the submarine hangar.
Andy, you're gonna make me cry.
So yeah, that's Final Fantasy VII. Whew. Sorry, I need a moment.
Yeah. Segway.
Segway. So, as the host, it's my job to do a recommendation for something video game related for you all to try out this month. And this month I am recommending Sexy Waluigi.
Oh no, Andy!
Nope.
No.
Yes, it's happening.
Do not taint this.
Nope, it's happening.
You just made one
No.
of like the most beautiful conclusions to a podcast.
I already had Sexy Waluigi written down, so this was already planned.
Andy,
It's not related to Final Fantasy VII. Come on.
It doesn't have to be related to Final Fantasy VII.
I respect it.
You would.
You would. No.
No, look.
Yes.
If we cannot
No,
accept...
I'm not looking at anything. Stop showing it to me.
Chip, look, if we can't accept Waluigi as a sexual being, then we will never progress as a society. So basically all I want you to do
Amazing.
is Google Sexy Waluigi, and let's have a look and see what's going on.
I mean, you assume I already haven't.
I know you have, it's fine.
I'm not going to.
I was not
He's
expecting this tonal
he's
shift,
wi-
and I am uncomfortable.
There's one in him, he's wearing suspenders with no shirt on, and he looks ripped. That's quite good.
Oh, Christ.
This took a turn.
What is happening right now?
It's like Final Fantasy VII, wild tonal shifts.
How dare you? No, it's not. How
Ooh.
dare you taint this thing we've just had?
Big fan, Andy. Very
I don't
proud.
really know what to do with myself now.
Oh, there's one where he's wearing a bra.
I want a shower.
That's
I
nice.
want to scrub myself clean from this.
So yes, Google sexy Waluigi and have a good time. So
Jesus fucking Christ.
what did you expect?
Not sexy Waluigi.
No.
Well, I've been threatening it for a long time, so.
Oh, Christ.
So yeah, thank you for being with us, even through the sexy Waluigi stuff. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please give us a subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and leave a 5-star review wherever possible. You can find us on Twitter at OneUpPod, that is 1UPP-OD. You can follow me personally if you want to after that, on Twitter at truly_defective. And Sasha, where can they find you?
I am at BashitDemonHead on Twitter, Twitch, and wherever else you might find social media or gaming things.
Becky, what about you?
I am Becky Grace Lee on Twitter, which is LEA, and you can also find me there on Instagram with that handle as well.
And Chip, where can people DM you pictures of sexy Waluigi?
You can come and get blocked by me on Twitter, at the Chip Thompson. And you can't send pictures on Twitch, but you can come and say hello there anyway, where I am Chip Thompson's Thumbs.
So, once again, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next month for L.A. Noire and its cavalier approach to misogyny.
Wow.
What a
Amongst
lead.
its many crimes.
So there will be thoughts, no doubt. And please remember to get a life and play video games.